Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill comes to us from Chairman Sakachi. The measure provides that wetland buffers shall be included in the calculation of buildable lot areas, minimum lot sizes, or in the calculation of buildable lots or units, provided, however, that this does not apply to lots directly abutting surface reservoirs with direct withdrawal use for public drinking water. The latter language is a compromise and agreed with by DEM. They had made that modification request. It's a good bill, Speaker, and I move passage.
Chairman Craven moves passage. That is seconded by Representative Bennett, Whip Edwards, and Chairman Shikachi. Representative Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is yet another example of us infringing on local planning and local zoning. What this is going to do, it's going to have two practical effects. It's going to, one, allow land that currently does not have enough developable area to be subdivided, and also where property isn't built out, many jurisdictions such as mine say that you can only have a certain % of your lot covered. And those jurisdictions exclude the wetland buffer from developable area. This is a big problem. I think it infringes on local sovereignty. And guess what's going to happen in response to this bill? Towns are, one, going to decrease the % of your lot that can be built on, town-wide, and they're going to increase the size of the lot needed for a subdivision. So guess what's going to happen? Lots that this wouldn't affect, lots that do not have wetlands, their property rights are going to be infringed by this. They're not going to be able to subdivide their lots. They're not going to be able to build as much on their lots because the town-wide response to this bill is going to decrease the total lot coverage that's allowable, and it's going to increase the size of the lots needed for a subdivision. So with all due respect to the sponsor, who is my friend, and the chairman, who is also my friend, this is bad policy. It will actually have the opposite effect that the building industry wants. This is going to decrease development, it will infringe further on local sovereignty, and it is bad policy. It is bad policy. This body needs to respect local sovereignty and local zoning, and 2 days ago we took some sovereignty away with the spires and chimneys and the like, and the freeboard, and this is yet another example of it. And I'm sure it will happen again next year. And it's a problem. So I urge the defeat of this bill. And I urge you to respect our municipalities and their ability to plan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Marshall.
Mr. Speaker, on abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote.
Clerk, please send Representative Marshall a recusal form. Representative O'Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without objection, I'd like to be recorded in the affirmative on items 22 and 23, please.
You may, so ordered. Chairman Shikachi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate the debate by my good friend, Mr. Filippi, and his position. And I will just tell you that you're welcome to vote the way you want to. I have a much different opinion of that. Unfortunately, some of those cities and towns interpret this the way they want to. And in fact, they do use this as a way to control zoning and to control development unfairly, in my opinion. And if they want to control development, they want larger lots, you want less, then buy the land or buy the development rights. So what they do is they pass regulations, or even worse than passing, they interpret regulations on your privately held land. This, in my opinion, is a very Republican bill, and I would hope that you, caucusing with the Republicans, would look at it that way. But in this respect, you're looking at land that's privately owned, and people pay taxes on it, but they can't develop it. And it's a fairness issue. It's a fairness issue for private parties, a private party's rights. And I feel very strongly the opposite way you feel. I respect you, I like the communities you represent, but a lot of them are very difficult for homeowners to get the full beneficial use of their land. And if communities don't want ownership to do that, then they should give them a break on taxes, let people tax it as open space. Before you were here, we had a similar bill 3 years ago regarding slope. Several communities were interpreting slope as non-buildable land. The interpretation was all over the map. I took that regulation against the town of Johnston at that time to federal court, and I won the case for my client. So the reality here, this is a uniformity of interpretation. This bill has been worked on and negotiated. I think this is a very fair outcome. And if towns want to increase their zoning, they have every right to, but most of those communities that do that do not meet the 10% requirement for affordable housing. And this bill also would help cities and towns meet that 10% that don't meet it right now. I think it's a good bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge my colleagues to vote for it.
Representative Marcello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman yield to a question?
I will gladly yield to my colleague.
Chairman
Thank you,
Shikachi
Rep.
will yield.
Rep, I noticed in here, and I'm just reading this language, that this does not apply to lots directly abutting surface reservoirs. As the representative from the town of Situate, obviously, reading the plain language of it, would not apply to lots that abut surface reservoirs, which would include Situate. I guess I'm curious as to how that provision got in there. Was that something that DEM had requested, or where did that language come from, if you know?
My good friend and your good friend, the whip, Jay Edwards, was concerned about the town of Tiverton, and very fairly and reasonably, we worked out a resolution that would protect drinking water that also protects the town of Situate. So this would not include, this was not put in on behalf of Situate, but it certainly includes Situate.
So this act, even if it were to pass, would not apply to lots in Situate that abut a drinking water supply?
Anywhere in the state, Situate, Tiverton, anywhere, even Block Island or South
Thank you.
Kingstown.
So I'd like to thank the whip for looking out for not only his community, but mine. Thank you, whip.
Representative Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I don't see this as a Democrat or Republican issue. I see it as a local control issue, and that transcends parties. I'm sure there'll be members from both parties voting red or green on this. And, you know, like the slopes, Mr. Chairman, if you feel it takes away someone's property rights and their due process, there's a court process for that, just like what happened with the slopes. So I think the argument should be at the local level. Let's have the debate at the local town councils. Let's have like the localities make these individual decisions. Here we're trumping and going around that process, and it just offends local control. And I think all of us are from communities where we respect that local control, and this just isn't the right way to go about things. So I appreciate your opinion too, Mr. Chairman. You are my good friend. And I'm happy that we can disagree and not be disagreeable. Thank you.
It's an awful lot of goodwill around here tonight. Deputy Speaker Lima.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. And no offense to the attorneys, my good friends in this room, but Representative Filippi just gave you the reason to vote for this bill. Go to court. That's all we need to do. Tell our constituents, go to court, go to court, go to court, and spend more money. Please support this.
There are no other lights. Clerk, unlock the machine. All in favor, please vote green. Those opposed, red. Clerk, lock the machine. 49 in favor, 15 opposed. The act prevails. Next item, clerk.